Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking some time to join us today to talk about extending protection to work from home users. Um, uh, Everyone's busy right now, so thank you for taking some time to look at this. We really think that it's important to think ahead on this as the setup of our networks and our users and where they work has changed. We need to evaluate, does the same protection strategy that has worked so well for us continue to work well when a few of the pieces on the board have changed. So thinking ahead on this is always better than thinking about it after the fact, especially now when making any quick corrective reactive changes would be pretty difficult in the current scenario. So thinking ahead, being proactive about implementation as opposed to having to react is the best strategy because it can be a lot more stressful for everybody if you're in a reactive scenario. So I applaud you for thinking ahead. Today, I am joined by my co-host, Paul Garcia. Paul, thanks for taking some time to spend with us this morning. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Zach. Always love to be in attendance for these.
Paul and I work with Western NRG's customers every single day, side by side, trying to provide what we've learned by focusing on this to our customers, giving them the information they need to make a decision, information both about what we see out in customers' networks and out in the market, and kind of apply that specifically to your needs, trying to provide you with a very custom, you know, custom fit solution, something that fits right for your needs, and that's what we do, and we love working with you guys. So extending protection to work from home users. We want to start by looking at just three top shelf news stories on stuff that we're seeing out there. So when it comes to COVID-19 cybersecurity news, we're seeing an enormous amount of email activity surrounding this event. Google recently reported that they're blocking 18 million malicious coronavirus emails per day. That's just Google, right? So not even everyone uses Google. A lot of us use Office 365, but this is just what Google is saying. By the way, 18 million. These are in addition to the 240 million coronavirus related spam emails that Google is blocking every single day. So an enormous amount of email activity as it relates to this. It kind of just makes sense, when there's something going on, we're interested to learn more about it. We want to read articles about it, and people send us messages with information about it. Paul, I'm sure this happens to you even in more benign scenarios like playoff season or something like that, where the amount of communication gets higher, and you see more going on. So Google's seeing a ton of this, and that's just a solid sliver of the internet, but not even the entire picture. So heads up.
Yeah, Zach, I want to call out there that that's just what Google's reporting that they're catching, right? I mean, like you said, not everybody uses Google, but at the same time, Google in itself is not a security company. So they're just catching the most basic, probably the easiest malicious things to find. That doesn't include any of the sophisticated threats that we see on the security side, that Google is prepared or set up to block.
Yeah, it's a good point. Google, it's a great call. Google's not a security company. They're an internet search provider. They have some other great tools, but they're not a security company. That said, they're looking out for their, people that are using their services. So they're making, like you said, low-hanging fruit effort to get this out of people's inboxes. but that's just the low-hanging fruit that they're catching. They're not kind of getting into the upper echelons of evaluating, more suspicious, not necessarily clearly bad, but kind of in the middle. They're not messing with that stuff. That would be something more like something that one of our email security engines would do. That's a good call out. This is kind of this. I would put these items squarely in the low-hanging fruit, obviously bad stuff. Yeah, definitely not everything. All right, the next thing that we're seeing is the exploitation of scarcity and people, clamoring for resources. Things that are in short supply, like hand sanitizer, face masks, other household products. Causes people to, go outside the normal swim lanes of where they would shop and trustfully provide their credit card info. So we're seeing a number of scams, where desperate online shoppers are purchasing, quote unquote, face masks. But ultimately, these are just, elaborate, fronts with a web page and a shopping cart, but they're never really gonna, they're never really gonna receive anything. Nothing will ever get shipped to them. So whenever there's this kind of, high volume of activity and there's scarce resources, that's an opportunity for cyber criminals to say, oh, hey, we've got some, you want to buy that? Step right up. So definitely something that we want to keep an eye out for and not fall victim to.
Definitely.
The last one, yeah, very interesting, kind of taking it to the next level. There's an app, COVID-19 tracker, that promises up-to-date info, tracking on data, geographically. So it promises some pretty good info, and it's pretty well designed. Nice icon and stuff like that. But as soon as you download it and start it, get it up and running, it immediately locks down the smartphone and demands a ransom payment to get your smartphone back. So pretty pretty creative and kind of going the extra mile, not just an email campaign or a web page, but actually creating an app that someone would install on their phone and go after them. So yeah, this type of stuff, very dangerous and something that we've seen before in the smartphone malware category. Because sometimes we're like, we don't issue smartphones to our employees, so it's not really a big, it's unfortunate if that happens to them, but that doesn't really affect us. And we know that's not true, because the first thing that every piece of malware tries to do is spread. So we see a malware infection on the smartphone, and what that immediately tries to do is see what Wi-Fi network it's connected to. Hey, can I spread to anything else that's on this Wi-Fi network? Are there any other local area networks that I can communicate with from this Wi-Fi network? And then if anyone plugs in the smartphone, Paul, I know you ask this to customers all the time, does anyone plug in their smartphone to their computer to charge it at your office? I feel like the most common answer I get is, well, they're not supposed to. But yeah, probably a good amount of people do. So, a USB connection, another great way for a piece of smartphone malware to jump from its initial infection point over to something a lot juicier, which is your business computer network. That's where some really valuable information might be. Not as much your selfies and your cat memes, but hey, there's credit card info, customer information, your customer database, stuff like that. So these are a few stories that we've seen, just a huge uptick in activity in the cybercriminal space as it relates to work from home. So with that, we kind of want to, okay, so there's a lot of activity. Is this just a lot of hype, or is there really some sort of substantive difference in the scenario that we're currently in? So kind of, how is work from home different, specifically? So want to go through a few things where when you're working in the office, but behind a perimeter firewall that you have installed, you have some security mechanisms that are keeping you safe. Some of those are obvious, and some of those are a little less obvious. So you kind of just want to, go through three of those to show how here's how the work from home scenario is different than what we're used to when we work in the office. The first one is Intrusion Prevention Service, IPS for short. So this is a super crucial service that the firewall provides at our office that frankly, I think it gets overlooked. IPS blocks bulk attacks, so kind of mass attacks that are going on the internet, literally every second. The quantity of intrusion attacks in 2019, as reported by the SonicWall Cyber Threat Report, was 4 trillion attacks. Now, we're used to numbers and specs and throughput and connection counts, because we deal with, firewall and security services all day. But I'm gonna be honest with you, Paul, 4 trillion is a pretty difficult number to comprehend.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I can count dozens, hundreds, thousands, you kind of get into the hundreds of thousands. It's, still once you're into the millions, it's like, okay, we're kind of pushing it. But we're talking, past the hundreds of millions, 4 trillion intrusion attacks. And that's just a staggering amount that's hitting networks every single day. And it's good to understand like what's the play here for a cyber criminal. The first thing is they're trying to see, hey, who's out there? It's kind of the equivalent of picking up little pebbles and throwing them into the dark. And when you hear a dunk, when you hear like, oh, that hit something, that means there's something there. I wonder what's there. Let's see if we can send out something, something more sophisticated. So it's a probe. A lot of these intrusions are initially they're a probe. Hey, who's out there? Who's alive? Is there anything going on here? And once that probe shows to be successful, that's when the real intrusion attempt. Hey, there's somebody alive over here. Okay, I wonder what kind of security they have. What will they allow in through their perimeter? And so it'll launch a more sophisticated intrusion that's going to, really do some damage to the network.
Zach, I think that's a really good call out because, I can tell you in talking with customers on a day-to-day basis, we kind of lose sight of that. I think of the IPS as kind of the unsung hero of the firewall in that it's so easy for us to get caught up in discussing, things like capture advanced threat protection for 0-day protection and inspection, or DPI-SSL for ensuring that the firewall is equipped to inspect HTTPS web pages for viruses and malware. But IPS kind of takes a back seat there. It's often lumped into, the summary of what is just included with, with the device out of the box. So really good call out there.
Yeah, you're spot on. It's the fundamental. It's the bread and butter. It's not necessarily what's new and sexy and catches headlines. But with 4 trillion attacks going out per year, it's a must-have. And the reality is, people don't have firewalls at their homes, and they don't have something that is protecting them from these broad intrusion attacks. So it's kind of only a matter of time before these intrusions on their home device. Or, hey, I see there's a device here. I saw that it's there. Let's see if let's see if it's susceptible to a further attack. So that's a big difference. Good to keep in mind. Another one is content filtering service. And just to call out, traditionally we think of content filtering as unwanted content. Nobody needs to be looking at gambling websites while they're in the office. That's just not necessary. But really, content filtering is also used to stop malicious websites, not just something that's borderline or potentially objectionable. They're used to block known sites that provide malicious files and content. Something like, hey, they want to steal your login credentials, or they want you to download this malicious file that's posing as something different. So content filtering is not only a content service, but it's also a security service. And since you're not behind the firewall at your home, these connections can be made freely. And just so you know, often without the user knowing that the connection is being made. Sometimes certainly it's a user unknowingly navigating to the site and it's actually malicious and they didn't know, and content filtering normally would have stopped it. But sometimes that connection's happening in the background. This malicious thing that's going on is attempting this connection in the background, and content filtering would normally stop it. But because it's happening in the background, and there is no content filtering on a home network, that connection will be allowed, and then who knows what's going to go over it. So good to know. Content filtering is actually providing you some very nice security, even though you're not going to recognize it up front necessarily. Last one I just want to call out is gateway antivirus and anti-malware. So these services scan every single packet that comes into the network, making sure that there's no malicious payloads hidden inside any packet. Extremely effective at blocking mass market, malware and viruses. So these filter out thousands, millions globally every single day of mass market malware that's getting sent out. So it's between all of these services we mentioned, there's a lot that the firewall is protecting your endpoints and your servers from before anything even gets there. And in a work from home scenario with no firewall at somebody's home, they're susceptible to these things. So putting a bow on that, ultimately, if someone's working from home without any layer of protection that they're used to, if something happens on that laptop while they're working from home, it could absolutely be spread over the VPN, which, just as a point of fact, VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. VPNs exist to make it appear to the system as if that person who's connecting over the VPN is actually sitting in the office. So from a digital perspective, it's as if that computer were in the office and hardwire plugged in with an Ethernet cable into the corporate network. So the VPN is created just so that someone will connect to the office and see all the resources that they normally would as if they were sitting in the office. So if something malicious happens on that work from home computer, it can spread over the VPN back to the office in a couple of different flavors that we'd be happy to dive into with you, and ultimately compromising your production network, even though that originated outside the network from that home user. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a high volume of activity these days because there's a lot of uncertainty around us and there's a lot of interest in getting more information. It's absolutely a different security topology is the technical term we use. Things are laid out differently. Typically, we have all these computers inside the network perimeter. Now, most of these computers are outside the network perimeter, and that creates a very different security scenario than we're used to supporting. So the operative question, how do we extend protection to work from home users? And the real answer is we need to add an additional layer of security. We're used to the firewall layer being, primary, number one. The very first thing that happens is the firewall protects us from anything that's coming in. And since the firewall can't be that first layer for us, we need to add another layer. So another layer of protection in this scenario looks like endpoint protection that will provide continuous monitoring, filtering, and protection for every computer. And this could be a computer that's inside the network still, like maybe a server, or a user computer that's outside the network, whether that's a desktop computer, workstation, or laptop computer. Captured Client is a sophisticated, lightweight security application that can be installed on desktop, laptop computers, and servers. So it's software-based, no additional hardware required, just a very lightweight installer that we put on every single computer. if we look at the workflow for how Capture Client works, it moves through a very tidy filtering system that is built very efficiently, thereby addressing some of the traditional issues that we see with desktop antivirus applications. Paul, I don't know if you hear this much, but I certainly do. When when people are running a traditional antivirus, the scanning process it noticeably impacts the performance on their computer. They notice their computer being slower. They notice as resources are being consumed, and it makes their their business applications run slower. And so that's for me, that's one of the biggest gripes that I hear from people when talking about a desktop antivirus applications, just how many resources it takes up on their computer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we hear day in, day out as we're quoting new solutions to customers, because, it's just something that is time consuming and labor intensive on the network. So yeah, we hear it all the time.
It's tricky because on the one hand, like, you need to have security. Like, it'd be irresponsible to not have adequate security in place. So you don't want to get rid of it, but also, like, people are there to get work done. They want to get their jobs done, and so having something that slows them down, even though it's protected, it's just kind of this. There's a lot of tension there. So Capture Client was built to address that, built with that in mind. Everything here is extremely efficiently coded and very lightweight, so it moves extremely quickly, while still providing even better, like significantly better security than you're going to see with traditional antivirus application. So what that looks like is, whitelisting and blacklisting is the very first filter. So this kind of, gets a lot of low-hanging fruit out of the way. After that, it uses a static inspection engine, kind of getting that next layer of low-hanging fruit, not necessarily something that was on a whitelist or blacklist, but something that we have seen before. It is a known piece of malware, and we're just going to immediately eradicate that and not let it get through. From there, we go to the real star of the show, which is dynamic behavioral analysis. So this is the key differentiator between any traditional antivirus application and what we're providing with Capture Client. Capture Client provides always on behavioral monitoring of the computer. And when I say behavioral monitoring, I don't mean they're seeing like how long is Paul spending on this website, or in this QuickBooks application, or anything like that. It's monitoring what's happening under the hood on the computer. Hey, what's being written from the hard drive to memory to the system processor? What sort of requests are being made? What commands are being executed? Are these typical? Are these acceptable? Or is this highly abnormal behavior, not something that we would expect or view as appropriate? We see this trying to spread to other computers. We see it trying to start encrypt files and password protect them. This is not okay behavior. So this continuous behavioral monitoring happens. There's no scanning happening. It's just a very lightweight background monitoring of everything that's happening, making sure that there's no funny business going on. And if there is, then we kind of move to step 4 here, which is a response. We immediately quarantine whatever's going on. We immunize the system from that. We remove it, we isolate it, we delete it from the system, and if necessary, there is a rollback feature, so that if anything happened that you're uncomfortable with, you can roll this system back to a previous known good state, and it's just like it was an hour ago, and you're back to work. So all of these measures taken together provide one of the best, honestly, if not the best security platform you can get, because you're getting all of the the traditional methods of cutting a lot of low-hanging fruit out of the way right from the get-go, and you're catching very sophisticated malware, some malware that doesn't even have a file associated with it. So commonly we see malware contained in a file, either an executable or an application file, or very commonly a PDF file or a Microsoft Office document. But increasingly, we're seeing new examples of malware that's just code. It gets injected somewhere into the system, and it's not actually contained in a file. So traditional antivirus is relying on file inspection to see something malicious. And if there's no file, then there's nothing for it to see. So having something that's monitoring behavior is absolutely crucial. Capture Client provides this by combining SentinelOne, who's a leader in the next generation antivirus space. They provide, this brand new technology of machine learning, behavioral analysis, artificial intelligence. So SonicWall has partnered with them to use the technology they've developed and combined it with the Capture Advanced Threat Protection engine that SonicWall developed, which is extremely effective at identifying never seen before malware. So these two things combined into Capture Client, like I said, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this is the best security you can get, because you're getting both continual behavioral monitoring as well as the best multi-engine cloud sandbox available. Those two things together are, I cannot think of anything that can provide you with any better security than these two things together.
Zach, I'm going to step in for a second and just thank you for bringing up the fact about the fileless malware, because that's something that we're starting to see on the sales side trending a lot with customers, especially going into this whole COVID-19 scenario. But that's a huge upcoming vector where not a lot of people are aware of the fact that that is a possibility. But we're starting to see some rise in education on customers' ends, and we've even had, as some scenarios where we've helped customers fix that problem with Capture Client. So I just kind of wanted to shed some light on that subject there, because I think it's bigger than what most people are making it out to be at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, if anyone in the audience wants to hear more about some of those success stories, it'll blow your socks off. Paul and I have been doing this for years, and one recent scenario where we helped a customer, it was like you simultaneously detest the person who put this malware together, and you have so much respect for how good they were at coding this thing. It had no file. It was just a code injection. It went into the Windows operating system. It used Windows to execute its commands. It had a random variable generator so that it would avoid detect, like just some of the best coding that could possibly be done. So yeah, if you want to hear more about that, I don't want to take too much time, but yeah, definitely reach out to us. We'd be happy to tell you the story. It's pretty crazy. So I want to go through a few specific features of Capture Client. In addition to the security engine, which we just reviewed, there's web threat protection. So web threat protection blocks connection attempts to malicious websites, IP addresses, and domains. So kind of using that security component of content filtering that we referred to earlier, we can do this even if the computer isn't going through the firewall. Capture Client can provide that same service, blocking any connection attempts to those malicious sites and providing notification to both the administrator and the end user that that's going on. So pretty great that we can bring that functionality to client. Something very unique we can also provide is application whitelisting and blacklisting. So if there's malicious applications on a computer, or not even necessarily malicious, but let's just say, hey, I know the 5 business applications that my people need to use, put those on the whitelist, put everything else on the blacklist. And you can be very specific, and you can also just, even if you don't take action, you can get a full application inventory from every single computer on the network. So you can see exactly what's there, and from there you have the intelligence you need to make a decision on, hey, do I want to take any actions here, or is there anything else? Is there anything else that I want to do? Okay. As you may or may not know, inspecting encrypted traffic is a must-have for network security today. Capture Client can help facilitate one of the most difficult parts of enabling that, which is the trusted certificate deployment. So Capture Client can assist by deploying that certificate even to multiple certificate stores on every endpoint. So this is super handy. Paul, I know you see this because we talk about this often. That's a big holdup for people is how do I manage the deployment of the certificate, or it's a big holdup. And Capture Client can be a huge help here.
Yeah, I had a question about this earlier from a customer who was inquiring about getting this set up for their TZ500, but I wanted to also kind of bring this back to, earlier in the presentation when you were talking about the firewall's ability to inspect packets as they're traversing the firewall via gateway, antivirus, and anti-malware. That the huge call out here is that, the any Gen 6 appliance is not out of the box ready to be inspecting any SSL or TLS sites or HTTPS traffic. So it's always crucial and important to make sure that the device is configured to do that with, obviously we have options for customers for us to contract and engage us to configure that part of their firewall for them. But, going back to something we spoke about, just you and I, Zach, earlier, Google at the beginning of the year published a transparency report that stated that 93% of traffic is HTTPS encrypted. That is a huge hole or vulnerability if you're not running something like DPI-SSL on your firewall, because without that you have 93% of the internet coming through your firewall that's not being inspected. So taking this simple step, getting that configured, pushing out these DPI-SSL certificates to all the workstations is a way of massively improving the security posture of your firewall.
Yeah, you're spot on. This is the next frontier for network security, is making sure that encrypted packets are inspected on their way into the network. And so if you have questions about that, please reach out to us. We want to tell you about that. And fortunately, what we're talking about today, Capture Client, can make that process much smoother. And we have a lot of tricks that tricks and tips that we've developed to make this process a really good one. 3 more things to hit on. I just want to circle back to the remediation or rollback. This is something that's totally unique to an antivirus application. Rolling back an infected Windows PC to a previous clean state. This is, our offering is the only one that includes this in the antivirus. Of course, you can come up with a backup solution that's totally separate from this, but Capture Client will leverage VSS, Windows Shadow Copy, to provide this service with no other software required. So again, totally unique in that regard. This allows you to have like end-to-end peace of mind. Not only do you have the best security on the front end, but if anything were to ever happen, you can just roll back. Very easy process directly from the administrator interface. So it's really nice tool, and especially for folks who've gone through that pain of having to restore a computer and wipe it and start from scratch. That takes so much time. There's a lot of pressure and tension because someone wants to get back to work. So having this can save many hours of time if the situation called for it. So yeah, a great tool to have in your back pocket if it ever came to it. I want to just do a brief shout out of attack visualization. I apologize, the animations aren't working. I have a few different screenshots to show, but if you want to see more on this, I'd be happy to show you. Just let me know. But this is really cool. Anybody in a technical background will appreciate how much visibility and data that can be retrieved from the Capture Client engine. You can see the whole storyline of a threat event, see exactly what happened. Where did it start? Where did it try to go next? Where did it try to go from there? Was there kind of a network of disparate things that banded together to perpetrate this attack? Or it is very valuable. Some of our, most senior technicians, this is one of the things they appreciate most about this platform is you can see exactly what happened, and that can help you make good security decisions. Hey, do we need to change our policy? Do we need to separate this part of the network out so that this wouldn't be able to connect to this? It's really giving you the intelligence you need to make good security decisions. Whereas, often, frankly, some people we work with, when they come to us after an event, um, they can't tell. They don't really know what happened. They don't know where got touched, where didn't. They don't really know if they've addressed specifically the issues that were at play. So that's not a great situation to be in. So having this, visualization and this data can give you that peace of mind, and you can make the security decisions that you need to best protect your network. All right, last one here, and this one's really cool because normally you'd have to have a standalone piece of software to accomplish this, but this is built right into Capture Client. USB device control, so you can block USB device connections, and not just block everything, like paint it with a broad brush, but you can block everything while whitelisting your friendly devices, like your HP printer or specific thumb drives that your company has issued. You can whitelist by even device serial number. So you could say, this this Kingston flash drive with this serial number is okay, but other flash drives like the one someone picked up at the coffee shop, that's not okay. You can't do that. So typically this type of software would be extremely expensive, extremely sophisticated, and difficult to deploy. Now it's built right into the Capture Client application, and you can manage it from the same interface that you manage everything else. So very powerful security, built into an already great application. And I think if we ask ourselves or ask somebody around us, like, have you ever plugged in a USB drive that you didn't know where it came from? Like a common one is, hey, will you print my resume? And of course, you want to be nice and help someone print out their resume. But really, you don't know what's on there, and honestly, maybe they don't either. So again, you can kind of protect yourself from something that would come in on a rogue USB device while still allowing for the critical connections that you do need to have happen. All right, at the end of the day, advanced malware bypasses legacy security by being sleeker, smarter, and just going right through what would normally work. So if you create something that's low profile and very smooth, it can cruise right through a traditional security event. So what we need to do is respond to that, come back with sophisticated security of our own, so that something that a new hacker has put together just isn't effective at sneaking through what we have in place. So with that, I'm going to open the floor to questions. There's a little questions box in the webinar. So please feel free to put your questions in there. And let's see what we've got rolling in.
Zach, I've got a couple here. I've been trying to answer some questions throughout the service, but I got a couple here that I haven't gotten to yet. The first one I have here is, what if our users are only using remote desktop for connecting back to the office? How can attack come over the VPN? I think there's a question to our earlier topic in the service where we were talking about the work from home scenario.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think if we're only using remote desktop protocol, how can something bad come over? So the two things I would say here is most client VPN connections are set up as split tunnel connections. So people go back to the office for RDP, but if they need something directly from the internet, then in their local web browser, they'll go out to the web on the connection at their house, and that's when they could have something malicious come in, maybe even lay dormant on their computer at their house, and then when it has the opportunity to spread over the VPN back to the network. That could either be through just transferring from the desktop at the house, back to the server at the office. It could also be into that remote desktop session. There's a clipboard function in remote desktop. So you can copy and paste text, which could be code, or you can copy and paste files from that local computer to the remote computer. And so both of those could be used to infect the office network from the home network. So even in that scenario, you want to make sure that endpoint that's connecting is clean and protected.
Awesome. Next question here. The additional features, I think this relates to Capture Client specifically. The additional features sound great, especially the USB control. I already have Symantec for desktop antivirus though. Is Capture Client any better than Symantec when it comes to scanning?
That's a good question. Yeah, I also want to combo that with another question I'm seeing in here, Paul, from Bernie. What's needed for that USB port block? So that's built right into Capture Client. So you can basically what you can do is you can say, hey, I want to block all USB connections, and then you enter in what you want to exclude from that. So your HP color printer, certainly probably input and output devices like keyboard and mice. So making some key exclusions, but blocking everything else. And our team has a lot of experience setting that up, so we can help with that. If there's any questions when it comes to, how do I set this up and what's the right way to do it, we'd be happy to help with that for sure. When it comes to how the inspection works, the traditional Symantec will be scanning files continuously, but it's not going to be monitoring the behavior that's happening on that computer. So that's really the difference between Capture Client and Symantec or any other traditional antivirus is only file scanning. Versus Capture Client will not only scan files in a very lightweight way, but it will also be monitoring everything that's happening on the system. So monitoring behavior for any malicious behavioral events. That's really the key difference there.
Perfect. I got a question here from Raymond asking, we have a lot of people working from home on Mac computers. Does this, assuming Capture Client, work on Macs?
That's a great question. I'm also seeing that in here from Dan. So yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely, it does. In fact, I'll do you one better. This is actually one of the best endpoint antivirus you can get for Mac. In the antivirus community, SentinelOne, the engine that we use as part of Capture Client, is universally recognized as the best-in-class antivirus for Macs. So it absolutely works on Macs, and it actually works really well.
Yeah, I actually run it on I have a new MacBook Air that I purchased a couple months ago, and I have an iMac, 21 inch on my desk that I also run it on there as well. So yeah, I can attest it. It's smooth and seamless in the background. Loving it.
Very nice.
Last question here from Peter. Just want to make sure I understand. Can you explain the application whitelisting and blacklisting again?
Yeah, absolutely. So that feature allows you to first take an inventory of all applications that are seen on endpoints. And then from there, you can say explicitly, these applications are allowed on this computer, or these applications are not allowed. So you can go both directions. You can say, hey, I just want to block, like BitTorrent or, some more shady applications like that. Or you can go the other way around and say, hey, I want to allow Google Chrome and QuickBooks and Outlook, these are my core business applications, but I want to block anything else, kind of run a tight ship there. Again, our team has some best practices there, so we can help you work through that. But yeah, we can definitely make it work however you want to. Got some other ones here. First one, Dan's asking about encapsulated logmein sessions. They're not happening inside of VPN. They're just, assumed happening either in the logmein application or maybe in the web browser, Dan. So asking about is there a risk associated with allowing mapping to local drives. Dan, I'm gonna follow up with you on that just to make sure that we understand the specifics, so I'm giving an accurate answer. I have a feeling, if you're mapping a local drive to that connection, that means if there's something that's existing on the the local machine via that map drive, or something that could be moved to that mapped drive, then thereby you're establishing a connection between the local computer and the remote. So when there's a connection, there's the opportunity for something to spread. But again, I'm gonna follow up with you so we can get into the specifics and make sure that we're giving a completely accurate answer there. Question in from Sandy. Oh, Sandy, hey. I've worked with Sandy before, she's great. Yeah, so her question about, protecting computers working from home, an executive perhaps working remotely, and kind of, maybe the antivirus software either gets uninstalled or doesn't get properly reinstalled. So we have a couple different mechanisms we can use to address that, Sandy, to make sure that the capture client software, A, gets installed in the first place, and then B, stays installed. There's an enforcement mechanism in capture client combined with the SonicWall firewall that we can use to enforce usage of capture client, both to avoid intentional or accidental removal, but also like maybe somebody gets a new computer and nobody just thinks to put it on there, so it flew under the radar. We can help address that too. Absolutely, we can help with that, and that quite frankly, that's a super common scenario that we see. Is I think if you ask this question to most administrators, are you confident that your endpoint antivirus is installed, up to date, and running on every single one of your endpoints? I think you get a lot of dead air, because I think the honest answer is, well, I installed it back when we started, or back when I set up this computer initially, but I don't really have an effective mechanism for making sure that it's continued to run, continued to stay up to date, and that it's really protecting us like I think it should be. I think that's the honest truth for a lot of people, and in anticipation of that, we have some really helpful tools and mechanisms to make sure that it does stay that way for people. Looking at a question in here from Chuck. So yeah, he's asked about VPN clients not being configured to split tunnels. That's not necessarily what I'm talking about, Chuck. I think it kind of depends on, one, what you can do, and then two, what you want to do. A tunnel wall situation requires pretty robust internet, both at the remote site and at the host site. So you're talking about kind of a significantly more, speed, need for speed, no pun intended, if you're doing a tunnel wall scenario. So if you're going to do a split tunnel scenario, which is very common, there's nothing wrong with it. You just need to be more thoughtful about, one, how you set up that connection, and two, you really should be having an endpoint layer of security if you're doing a split tunnel connection. That's really just, it is kind of just as simple as that, frankly, because when you're having something connect from anywhere, there's the potential that if that machine were to become infected out in the world, that it's going to come back and spread it at the office. We see this very frequently in people who have laptops. Either any type of employee who has a laptop, they go out on the road to a vendor site, a customer site, working from home, working from the airport, working from the coffee shop. They're not protected at any of those locations unless they have endpoint antivirus. And then they get infected, and then they bring that back into the office and spread it to people in the office. This is important technology to have, kind of regardless of your deployment scenario. Okay, one more question. I got one here from Mark. Kind of asking, is this a replacement or a complement to a traditional antivirus application? Mark, this would displace a traditional antivirus, because if I kind of go back to our overview slide here, we're really beating traditional antivirus at their own game with these first two components here. We're doing this, this whitelisting, blacklisting, and this static analysis, and that's really replicating everything that traditional antivirus can provide, but actually doing it a lot more efficiently. So you're going to see a lot less load on the system and less resources consumed on the computer. And then we're going beyond that, which is really the meat of this, which is with the dynamic protection and the behavioral analysis. Traditional antivirus won't provide behavioral monitoring and protection for a computer. So we're providing both, whitelisting and blacklisting and efficient file scanning, as well as continuous behavioral analysis. So we would remove the traditional antivirus and replace it with this, it's going to provide astronomically more protection by looking at all behavior happening on the system, and with lower system overhead, less resources consumed. Yeah, good question. I guess a small caveat would be, sometimes people, have a need to, run both in parallel for a short period of time, or they want to do that, and you need to be really thoughtful about how you do that. But we can absolutely address specific scenarios where someone wants to do that for some specific reasons. So I'll follow up with you on that one-on-one, Mark, to kind of see what your needs might be there. Awesome. Everyone, again, I know we're very busy right now. Thank you for spending the time with us today to learn more about this.